Hello, my name's Stuart and welcome to this webinar. We're going to be looking at a little job today that was done for the American Football League called the Heisman Trophy. Just to put it in some context, we're going to look at the final first, and then we're going to talk about two of the sequences that we're going to attempt to recreate in this hour section. So without further ado, here's the final play out, and then we'll be looking at the graphic sequences.
College football's heroes of the past welcome a new member to their exclusive club. On Saturday, December 8th, one college football player will transcend greatness and become a legend. Will Florida's record-setting superhero emerge from a wide-open field, Missouri's gutty leader with the golden arm, or will it be another signal caller with jaw-dropping numbers? The Heisman Trophy presentation presented by Nissan, December 8th at 8 on ESPN, followed by Bowl Mania.
So nice little promo. Like I said, all originally done inside of Smoke as well. The two bits that we're going to be looking at today are we're going to be looking at creating this kind of like wall of portraits, these photographs, all inside the frames. Now, once again, this was all originally done in Smoke. We're going to do our own spin on this. We're going to make our own kind of version, just look at some of the new tools as well in the extension. The one that we're going to start off with first is kind of like this little wipe-on effect that we've got here with the rays and the live action and things like that happening. Now, this actually happens several times within the course of the program in different versions, and we've got some prepared material here already. This is actually one of the breakout sequences, and you can see we've got this ray thing happening, we've got the live action in the background, and we'll look at basically how we can make this from scratch inside of Smoke. So we've got a few things that we really need to sort of generate, and I've made a few on the desktop already, and we're just going to step through very quickly some of these before we actually make the background. But obviously we need to make things like the paper texture at the background, we need to do the text, we need to do this kind of like graphic guy here, and then we also need to do the final sort of cut out with the rays of the football player as well. And we're going to tackle this using several different tools and try and do it in a slightly unusual way, just make things a little bit different. So first off, let's start creating the background paper texture. Now, as you can see, I've already got some here on the desktop. How did I make these? Well, really, we made these using the new Flame Effects 2 Stylize tool. Now, that's really kind of like it's a very creative tool. There's going to be loads of things that you're going to be able to do in it. Here, we just made up some textures. Also, we made a sort of like a sort of a graphic of a static frame that we pulled out, some live action clip. How we use it? Well, if we go into Stylize with just a white source to start with, nothing really much happens here. We actually just kind of load this in. Very sort of Photoshop-like. We can actually sort of build up different layers here. What's really nice about this is that we can come down onto here and we can actually start adding different textures. We can start adding different kind of effects to different things. Really sort of like a texture generator. In this particular case, using a white frame, but obviously if you're using like a graphic or piece of live action, very different effect, which we'll look at in a second. I'm just going to reset this for a moment. I'm just going to add a layer in here, and I actually just want to make up two textures that I'm going to comp a bit later on. So I've had a look through these to start with. We're actually going to use the canvas, and we're going to be looking at something like this one to start with. This is a paper texture which we're going to use, so I'm just going to render out one frame of that. And then we're going to stay on the canvas one here, and we're going to use something like some crumpled papers, and I believe this one was kind of quite nice. Now, these are procedural textures, which means we can kind of scale and manipulate them and animate them, which is kind of good for what we want to do. So I just want a couple of creases like this. I just want one off to one side. I'm just going to scale that a bit just so we've got a nice little texture happening, some crumpling. I'm just going to process out as well. Hopping back to the desktop, you can see that we've got our result clips there. Now I'm going to throw these away for a second because we've actually got some that I already made up earlier. The other thing we want to do is make up this kind of graphic of the other football players sitting in the context there as well. Now, like I said, we've got this static frame out of some live action. We could have downloaded another image, but this was just, once again, just trying to make something from nothing. And we're actually going to take this into Stylize as an image. Now, once again, if we kind of reset this and we add him in, you can see that it defaults to one of these drawing modes. You know, we can change these, we can animate these. If you had live action, lots of different things happening. It's a really big tool. So luckily, we decided to put a load of presets to sort of kind of get you started. And these are actually really good to understand how this works. Now, what I've done is I once again went through some of these. I kind of like the look of this cartoon number one. it starts to give me this sort of palette reduction with this nice thick outline. And you can see here literally how this was built up. So do experiment with this yourselves when you get hold of the extension release. But what's nice is that you can go through and modify these. So I sort of kind of decided that actually works nicer for what I want to do with a couple of these layers turned off. So we're going to leave it like this, process out of frame. And once again, we've got that element on the desktop as well. And I'm going to throw that away because I've already processed one out that I want to actually use. I'm going to need a mat to cut this out a bit later on. So once again, I just generated this in a quick Gmask. You don't want to see me drawing mats, so this is something I've done earlier. It's just an outline mat. And finally, the text. So once again, I've just generated some text in the desktop text module. I've generated Heisman, a straight line, and 2007. Way out of date, I know, but we're going to keep in the spirit of the thing. And now we've got all our elements ready, and we're going to start making our background. So if you saw our previous webinar, we used the modular keyer to do some kind of comping, and to be quite honest, I really love hijacking this desktop tool. It's really useful, and in fact we're going to just make up this texture with all our elements inside of there. Okay, so modular keyer, we're just going to select a front, back and a mat just to get us started, and that's going to take us into this. Straight off, we're going to delete all of our keyers, as it were, and just separate out the result there. So first thing we want to do is comp these things two together. We're going to do that through a color corrector. So nice new hotkey in this extension, just hitting the first letter of the node that you want actually highlights and centers at. So we want some color correctors. So we're going to bring out a color correct here, and we'll take this is our front and our background, and we're going to use that as a matte. And we're going to go straight to color corrects, and we're just actually going to use that matte functionality to kind of like limit and sort of kind of color our background. Final that we sort of spent a little bit more time on, but this is just to really give you a rough idea of how you can sort of kind of work inside of here. So we're just going to make that a bit darker. So there's our background built. Now the next thing we want to do is kind of get our sort of football player graphic on top of that. So if we come back out to desktop, we're just going to pick our stylized front. We're going to take that matte as well. So now we've got those in, and we're going to use a blend and comp to comp these over our background so far. So if we just feed this into our background for a moment, and then we're just going to take that as a front and that as a matte. Now obviously what's kind of nice about this is that we can start splitting our viewports up. We can start looking at our schematic in one view, and we can start looking at our result on the other. In fact, what's really nice here is that what we're going to do is we're going to start setting some context views, and we're going to set this to a context view here. Now what we'd like to do here is obviously we don't want this to be in this position, and also we don't want him really to be that kind of color. So first off, we're going to bring out some 2D transforms. We're just going to drop that into here for a second. We're just going to duplicate that really quickly and drop it into here. And don't forget, we've got our duplicate node, which is going to allow me to once again move these independently, link together, and it's going to move the front and the matte at the same time. So here, looking at our context view, you can see that now we can kind of go in and scale this. We're just going to turn off proportional. We're just going to set this to minus because I want it to be the other way around. Lock him a little bit. And we're going to kind of zoom him down and roughly sort of position him up where we want him, somewhere like this. So that's kind of good. Looking at our blend and comp tools, we want to sort of blend him in the background in some way. So I'm actually going to choose, we're going to use a Photoshop mode for this, I think. And we're going to do something like linear light or something like this. That looks kind of good. And once again, we can just play around with the transparency on this a little bit. And also what we'll do is we'll just kind of like knock down some of the saturation. We can actually take this down to 0 and then give it a slight tint just to sort of match it into the background. So kind of working nice in context there. Once again, what's really nice about this is if you want to make slight little tweaks, like if the edge looked a little bit too hard for what we wanted to, we can come straight out of here. We can bring out a blur node. We can drop that into our matte pipeline. And we're just literally going to blur by a couple of pixels just our mattes here, you can see, but you can see our result just softens off slightly inside of here. Right, so that's got our background over. The next thing that we want to do is get that text in with the Heisman in 2007. So once again, if we come back out to our desktop for a moment, and we're going to bring in all these elements in, our line and our 2007 for a minute. I'm going to bring those to here. The line we're going to deal with in a moment. That's going to be a separate element because we want to sort of frame the 2007. Straight off, we want to comp these two together. So once again, down to our node bin, we're going to bring out a blend and comp into this. We're going to do that as a front, and we're going to do that as our background. Now, once again, splitting our views down here, setting a context view for this particular one. And looking this, we can change our blend mode on this to something like add. They're both white. And then once again, what we need to do is to get out some 2D transforms. We're going to drop those in the pipe, just very quickly duplicate those as well. And that's going to give us the ability to come in very quickly and position stuff up exactly where we want. We can make the 2007 about half that size. We don't need that to be that big. We'll position it something like there. Select the Heisman, we can move it up. So we're just really sort of talking about the flexibility of working this kind of way. It's very quick. You've got lots of random access to all these nodes as well. And it's just a kind of a nice way to work. Now, we're going to do a very similar thing with our lines here. So once again, we'd like to have a blend and comp out. So we're going to take another one of these out into here. And we really want 3 lines to kind of like duplicate over. So if we take a 2D transform, once again, we're going to copy that 3 times, and we can take a pipe off of that original line. And what we're going to do is we're going to feed that into our front, into our second input, into our background. So once again, if we kind of look at this one now, and once again, we'll set a context for here. So what we can do here, come into our blend and comp. Once again, we're going to change that to an add, so they all work together. We're going to take our top one. We're just going to move it up there. We'll take our middle one. We're just going to move that to somewhere in the middle. So we've got something like that happening. Kind of works. Back out to here again. We want to combine both of these now together to have the 2 combined elements. So you know where we're going with this. Blend and comp again. We're going to take this as our front. We can take that as our background image for a moment, and once again we're going to want to sort of position this. So come to here, set another context. We're going to look at this in context of everything. Once again, our blend and comp, we're going to set this to an add, and you can see now that it's relatively easy for us to come up here, scale down our lines in position, just get it positioned something like that. I think make them about 45%, actually make them about 40%. Oops, if I could actually type, that'd be handy. Do something like this. And we want some lines over the other side, so once again, if we just actually duplicate this, we can take a second pipe from here. We can use our other blend and comp on this one. Take that one, that's going to be our duplicate. We can just literally now slide that across the other side. Right, so lots of things that's really very quick and easy to put these graphics elements together. Now we want to do a very similar thing to what we had before, so we come out to this view. We want to comp these 2 elements over each other. So once again, let's move that down. And we're going to use that same technique that we use this one with our color corrector. So bringing out a color correct for a second. And we're going to take our front and our background from this, and we're going to take our map from here for a moment. And once again, if we kind of look at that as a result, coming to our color corrector tools, and we can just actually start to darken that down, maybe give it just a little bit of a tint. Anyway, you're going to get the idea. It's very quick to use. It gives you a lot of control and a lot of random access back and forwards to sort of go and very quickly sort of tweak those tools and blend them in nicely. Now the final thing that we really want to do on this is put that grid work over the top. So we're really going to have to work out how we're going to do this. It's actually a nice little trick that we can do with inside the modular kit. If we just pop out a gradient node for a moment, and actually we're just going to select a black clip here just to give it a resolution. I'm just going to hook that in. Now the gradient node, once again, good for making gradients, but if we just come to a point here and take the sharpness off, we kind of get this grid checkerboard. And all we really have to do is turn these to be sort of kind of like white and black alternating. And there's a reason for what I'm going to do on this for a second. So actually I did that one wrong. We're going to make that one white. So I've got black and white squares. Now that's not really a grid. We want a grid overlay on the final image on this. So what we can actually do again, are really overused today, our 2D transform. of this. Now, what's kind of nice about this is that we can come through and we can use that to scale this down. Now, once again, not much for grid, but we've got this neat tiling feature in here. So once again, if we bring this down to around about 10, I want these to look a bit more square, so make one of these non-proportional and resync them. We can actually now start zooming this in proportion and get this nice checkerboard effect. Still not really a grid. Well, there's one more step here. We can actually use an edge detect node. If we just attach it onto here now, and we look at the result of this, now it's detected the edges where those black and white squares were kind of crossing, and it's given us a grid. So we're going to use, once again, that color correct technique. We're just going to just grab our branch up here, just going to move this a little bit closer so we don't have to keep panning around the screen so much. Bring out a color correct. Once again, we're going to take this as our front and our background. This is going to be our matte input. We're going to split our views for a moment and come into here, and we're going to set a context view on this one again. So we're going to be looking at our result. Using our color correct tools, we can actually sort of come into this now and actually just to start to darken this down, and once again maybe just give it this just a bit of a hint of color. Now the lines are a little bit too thin for me, so what's nice about this is that we can come back into the edge detect node and we can just literally widen out some of the softness on this, maybe something to here, come back to our color corrector curves and just kind of like just give it just a hint of just kind of blending in, something like this. So once again, just really nice quick way of putting these things together. The last thing that I did on this, we're going to drag out a final version that we actually did a little bit earlier down in here in our project bin. This is the final version that we kind of made up a little bit earlier on, and you can see the last thing that we did here was actually we drew some paint strokes that we used as a matte, and we pumped those into a color corrector, and once again we just sort of painted in context these kind of dark areas. So once again, if we kind of just set a context view onto this for a second, you can see that when I sort of paint some in here, and we're actually going to look at our paint node in context, and we'll just do a few little more. We're just going to take the pressure down there a bit and just reduce our brush size. We can actually paint some sort of mottling in context through that color corrector just to give it a little bit more texture onto the final thing. Last thing we have to do here is just render out a frame of this. We're going to be using it as our background, so we're just going to take our result node here, which is effectively going to be our output. We're just going to hook everything up, and we're just going to kind of process one of those frames of all that. Now what's nice about this, once again, you can save this as a setup. You can come back and revisit, and it's very easy to substitute out things like text and versioning. Back on our desktop now, you can see that we've got our background that we're going to use for the next stage of making the rays.